Appreciate your tolerance and letting me speak. I'm going to be real brief. So I just feel it's necessary to speak out. That I'm going to bring up the question of Syria. That I'm a strong opponent of Bashar al-Assad. I mean, he's a horrible dictator. Doesn't deserve to be in power forever, which is clearly his desire. And I denounce what Bush has done in terms of bombing what I could consider to be legitimate resistance to that. And I just wanted to briefly bring up the question, because it's been very controversial, about the Syrian civil defense, the White Helmets. I think that there's a lot of, someone that just goes with open eyes and looks at all the evidence. There's a lot of evidence that this is a genuine humanitarian organization that's been saving lives. That you can go to, meet people, from Syria who know people that worked in White Helmets, that it's not a fraud. And there was recently, again, without getting into any unnecessary length, but there's a statement by Roger Walters, who I'm sure you're all familiar with, and we all, respect his work.
I'm not familiar with him, but I think let's just get to the question.
Not to disparage what Walters' strong stand, but and I'll be glad to talk to you about this more after the meeting. But I'm trying to be brief. I'm doing what I can. But
no, you'll have to be brief. Just pose the question. And
so I'm introducing the question because just for the context, people who might not know about the controversy, and that you've been criticized by people, because of your position on the White Helmets, and I'd like to, I guess my position is a genuine humanitarian organization. I'd like to hear what you have to say about it.
Thank you for that question. Thanks for coming out. This was a question about Syria. This event was about Palestine and the Gaza Strip, and I understand there were some attempts to get this event canceled by, I don't know if they were comrades of yours, but there was an attempt to cancel this event and suppress this film screening by people who claim to be speaking in the name of the Syrian people, quote unquote. And it's, the kind of...
I wasn't part of that, so...
Okay.
I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, well, there was. Am I correct? Yeah, and they said, you can't show this film because Max's views on Syria, so show something by someone else. Here's some appropriate films. It's kind of like, reminds me of the book banning campaigns in the 80s when they said, you can't read Mark Twain or whatever. Here are some appropriate books, some more Christian books. And, obviously nothing happened, but it's, you've seen these elements who are dedicated to regime change in Syria. The same kind of project we saw reduce Libya and Iraq to failed states. The same project that the U.S. is trying to impose on Venezuela and Cuba. The same project that removed Jean-Bertrand Aristide. The same project that has attempted to remove Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua. The project that has destabilized entire regions of the world. We've seen these people dedicated to this project, which is supported directly by Israel, try to drive a wedge in the movement for justice in Palestine, and try to freeze people like me out simply because I have produced factual journalism exposing the propaganda ploys of that regime change project, the same way that I exposed the propaganda that was used against Haiti to remove Jean-Bertrand Aristide. And one of the most important propaganda ploys, most expensive and most sophisticated, and I give them credit, is the White Helmets, the Syrian White Helmets. You may have heard of them because a Netflix documentary about them won an Oscar. They were nominated for a Nobel Prize. They have been supported $55 million by the British Foreign Minister, the British Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson. Not exactly lover of Middle Eastern peoples. They've been supported to the tune of $30 million by USAID, which was created out of the CIA, and operates under the arm of the State Department. And they operate exclusively in areas controlled by Al-Qaeda and their allies, especially the CIA-created Free Syrian Army, which no longer exists. And so that's why, thanks to the work that many of us independent journalists have been doing, that for the first time in history, today, a Western government, the Dutch government, acknowledged that the White Helmets work hand in glove with Al-Qaeda, the group responsible for attacking New York City, and that they can no longer support this organization. And what we have had to do is take videos produced in places like Idlib, which is under the control of the largest franchise of Al-Qaeda since 9/11, by Al-Qaeda's media affiliates, which show White Helmets participating in executions of people for violating the theocratic order imposed by Al-Qaeda. White Helmets carrying weapons, White Helmets celebrating Al-Qaeda military victories, to show that this is not just a rescue organization, without denying that they have rescued people and that there are sincere people who are a member of that organization. Those are probably people you met. But you know who has been the White Helmet who's been in the United States the most? Riyad al-Saleh, the director of the White Helmets, who operates not out of Syria, but out of Turkey, at a training camp controlled by a British former Army officer, James Le Mesurier. And Riyad al-Saleh has gone to Washington, to London, and to Paris to lobby for sanctions on Syria, the same kind of sanctions that are destroying the livelihoods of people in Venezuela, the sanctions that contributed to hundreds of thousands of child deaths in Iraq in the 1990s. These sanctions are making it difficult for Syrian people to get basic medical supplies and especially cancer drugs. What kind of rescue organization lobbies for those sanctions? How can you call yourself humanitarian when you're doing that to Syrians? It's disgusting. And so that's why I wrote a series of articles that are totally factual and vindicated about the White Helmets. No one produced anything to debunk any of the facts I produced. What they did produce were petitions calling for me to be blacklisted and silenced, insults, death threats by phone, constant troll campaigns on Twitter, allegations that I'm a secret Russian agent, and it all relates to my perspective that imperialism is bad. What Syrian regime change forces have tried to do in the West is to define anti-imperialism as Assadism, and to equate Assadism to make Assadism a moral crime on par with anti-Semitism, and therefore make anti-imperialists social pariahs who are forbidden from having a voice in media, and they are a dangerous element on par with the Israel lobby. And I'll say one more thing. This August 22nd, Israel, the military of Israel evacuated 422 so-called self-proclaimed members of the White Helmets through the occupied Golan Heights and sent them to Jordan. Some were settled in Israel, and I don't know where the rest went. Israel worked hand in glove with the White Helmets, as well as the insurgent groups around the Golan Heights, like Forsan al-Julan, the Knights of Golan, who were paid to something like $5,000 a month per fighter by Israel. So I can understand why people would not like Bashar al-Assad. I can understand why they would be outraged by seeing bombings and that kind of thing. But the fact is, at this point, in 2018, for them to continue to call for regime change in Syria and doing to that country what was done to Libya and Iraq, they are on the same side as Israel.
Okay.